Hi, I'm Hein. You're watching From the Cape with Bass, hosted by Daniel Peterson.
Good day everybody. Today we are with great bass player Hein. Hein, can you tell me what your first musical experience was?
Ah man, well I was very lucky. I grew up in a house where there was always music. My father was an amateur saxophone player. He loved jazz, and my mom loved classical music. So we always had music around the house, and we had 4 kids, and we were all sent to music school. First with the recorder, then I very quickly changed to violin when I was like 8 years old or something, and that's what I've been doing. But then when I was a teenager, of course, I wanted to rebel, and pop music was coming up and the Beatles, so I got a guitar, and I played guitar in my little attic room. Instead of doing homework, I was playing the guitar, much to the frustration of my mom, but I just loved it. I played along with anything that was on the radio. I just played along by ear. But yeah, and then and my brother played, and we had a little Dixieland band, and we played music together, and we also did classical music, and I still was in the little orchestra in the town where I lived, so playing violin. So it was fantastic. It was a very broad breeding ground, if you want. And then in the church we had a little band, and I played the guitar, and this is the story of many bass players, I think. There was another guy that came and said, "Oh, I would love to join the band." I said, "What do you play?" He said, "I play guitar." I said, "Okay, then I'll do bass." You know what I mean? Like, you take the second violin, and it was fine. And I would play on my acoustic little guitar. I had a little pickup on it, playing through an old radio. I would play the bass. And then when I had a little bit of money, I bought my first terrible electric bass. You know, nice little 4-string, and that was it.
Okay, so why specifically did you choose the bass? Like,
well, it was actually
what
because
drew you to that? Is it that guy that came to the
yeah,
band?
it's and this is very typical, I think, for bass players. Bass players often think about the music first, and their instrument second. It's completely different than a horn player or a singer who's there expressing their world. But we're like, you know, like we're like with soccer, you're in the back, and you know, you're scoring, and you're not scoring yourself, you're just supporting. And I always had that. It was even difficult for me when I started to play jazz and acoustic bass later. I realized I wasn't a real bass player. I was a musician that played the bass. So I played too busy, and I played too high, and you know, people had to tell me, "Calm, man, you only have to play that simple stuff." So
keep it on the one. Keep it on the one.
Yeah, keep it exactly, and keep it simple, and keep it low, and keep it solid. And I really had to learn that. But you know, since I was a guitar player really, and a violin player, I always had that melodic. And it took me 30 years to kind of come back to that, and then I became more a soloist on the bass, and I like to be in a like duo or trio situation where I can really. But most bass players, they love to be, you know, be in the back and do that thing, which is the heartbeat of the band. You know? So it's been quite a voyage, I must say, since those days.
Wow. Can you tell me about your musical education?
Well, yeah, like I said, I had the violin lessons, then the whole thing with the guitar and the bass was self-taught. And then I went to conservatory to study teaching, music teaching, and I also was seriously playing violin still. But I played jazz on my electric bass, and I was in a big band, and I knew jazz had to be in a double bass. So at this conservatory where I saw this double bass in a room. I thought, wow, and I went to that thing, and I played on it, and it was the hardest thing. I thought, how can you play these big steel cables and that? Because on the electric bass I could play you know, I play some stuff, but it was so difficult. And really it was thanks to my pals that said, "No man, you cannot bring that electric bass, bring the double bass." And I would bring, I had bought simple double bass at that point,
Mm.
and I would bring the double bass, and I would hurt and blisters and blood. I mean, really
Yeah, yeah.
terrible massacre of the hands. But yeah, that was it. And then I gave that electric bass away to someone,
Mm-hmm.
and that was it. I never looked back because.
A question: who are your double bass heroes?
Well, I really loved Ray Brown and Paul Chambers. Those are the icons of the 50s.
Yeah.
And but then one day I bought Bill Evans live at the Village Vanguard, and it was with Scott LaFaro on bass.
Okay.
And that completely changed my life. It was like I was hit by a truck. It was like, wow. Because he took the bass to a place that I had never heard before, but that resonated so much with me because, again, I was not really a bass player.
Yeah,
I was a musician that played the bass.
Yeah.
And this guy was flying, and he was playing melodies, and he was playing interactive, and he didn't play like Ray Brown, solid and fantastic, but on the ground.
Yeah.
He was interacting, and I loved that so much. So
Wow.
that influence of Scott LaFaro stayed with me always. I was just listening to it this week, and I was like, oh, fantastic! I love that stuff.
Yeah.
And then in the beginning I took some lessons because I wanted to understand how this thing worked. I mean, violin is similar, but it's also very different.
Yeah.
So I had 10 lessons, I'll never forget, because there was in order for people to get a teaching degree, they had to teach some of the other students.
Okay.
And that was it, and then I was on my own, but then I put everything together, all my knowledge from the violin and from the piano and the harmony and the guitar, and I put it all together, and I said, because I was 23 when I picked up the bass for the first time, I said, okay, I'm going to do this seriously. And I did it seriously.
Wow.
I practiced for hours just to get, the hand good, not just go for the notes, but go for a posture that was good, and you need that for the bass because it's an intimidating instrument. You'll get tendonitis, and so and then I went to America, and I lived in San Francisco, first in Seattle, then in San Francisco for a few years, and that's where I learned. I found these books the other day, my little gig books. I had 30 gigs per month.
Wow.
A gig every day, sometimes 2 per day, and sometimes a day off. And it was always acoustic, so it was never pop music, but it was with a singer, or it was with a John Coltrane kind of quartet, or it was on the weekly jam session. It was so great. I was always playing, and I loved it. And then I got real strong, of course. And this is the time just before the real book, so you had to do a lot of stuff by ear, or know the repertoire, know your standards. And then when I came back to Europe, I was a bass player, and then I just gigged. I played gigs everywhere, and I was living in Holland and moving to Belgium and playing in Germany, and slowly got better. And then I was 30 years old, and then I was so sick and tired of my own playing.
So you were burned out?
Well, in a way, I saw that what I had developed was a strength and an understanding of the music, but no precision.
Okay.
If I saw A flat half diminished, I was like, oh, I can play an A flat, and maybe I can think about the C flat, which is B, and then I would fry in my head. Or I would always play the same thing, always the same. I just hurt myself. Because if you don't practice, you don't develop. It's and I often say this to my students. It's suppose for 3 years you lock yourself up and you study everything from Schopenhauer and art history and politics, and then after 3 years you go to the cafe and you go mingle with people and you think, I know so much, I'm gonna have a great evening, but you don't have the social skills. You don't even know how, can I have a beer please? It's terrible, it's not the way to do it. The other guy will go for 3 years. He'll go to the pub every night, yapping, "Hey man, how you doing? Yeah, I owe you a beer." And he's like, he's very good with that stuff. Both are not good, because that only going to the cafe every night. Well, what's the conversation about in the end? It's about soccer and women and cars. And only sitting in your room studying the most profound things will make you a socially handicapped person.
There we go.
So you need both.
Yeah.
And I realized my social skills were good. I knew how to swing with a drummer and how to get a sound and be in the band and pick up when the tune had to stop or go to a Latin groove. But I wanted to get deeper. So I stopped everything and I took a sabbatical for 6 months and I practiced. I practiced 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. I would just go in the morning, cup of coffee, the sun was out, and I would just go.
Was this in Europe or?
Yeah, I went to a little place in Wales, but it was nothing. It was in the middle of nowhere, and it was a shock, man, because I thought, okay, I'm going to practice now. And I could already play a little bit, like cool. So I thought I'm gonna come out like a Michael Brecker on the bass. And I remember that first day, I thought, okay, I'm gonna practice. I had my coffee and I thought, what shall I do? Maybe a C scale. Do. Nah. Let me maybe tune my bass for the first time in my life, seriously. Let me wash my hands and clean the bass. Okay. Now let me try to do the C scale good. Do. Nah. Do. Within 5 minutes I was playing do. Like that. And I realized that I was a master on the bass, but a very small master. That was my level. But I thought if I don't realize where my bottom level is, then I just keep on doing stuff more or less. So I went back to that, and that's what I did. There would be days I would go into that room and say, today I'm not going to play one note that is wrong. And I would just do scales or triads or so slow, but with complete conviction and love for the instrument. Do nothing a little bit louder or a little bit out of tune or a little bit this or no. Perfect. And if it wasn't perfect, it meant that I had to do it slower. It's that simple. And you just surrender to that, and then a whole kind of Zen thing comes over you. And so when I came out of that, it was not 6 months, it was 3 months. When I came out of that period, I was, of course, not the Michael Brecker on the double bass, but it was like I had become, instead of a Toyota Corolla, I was now a Mercedes. And the Toyota Corolla gets you from here to there as well. But it goes, brrr, that's how I played. Do. And after that, in the Mercedes, you go,
what style?
Everything clear, in tune, with a projection, not as loud, not as wild, not like a wild kid, but like a mature player. And changed my life, and it changed my life, and all of a sudden much better gigs came my way, because people feel that, they feel, okay, he's...
Makes perfect sense, eh?
It does, but it takes real, dedication to get there, because you don't get that, you simply don't get that for free. Nobody. I mean, people like Jacko, they didn't get that shit for free. They practiced, they worked on it, they perfected it, and it's beautiful. I think once you get bitten by that bug of the deep love for the instrument, then the world is your, you just go, man, it's and it never stops, because you realize that, okay, I was this kind of a master, now I'm like this kind of a master, but there is still that.
Levels to it.
It never stops, because as you know with many things, the more you know profoundly, the more you realize what you don't know. And so the older I get, the more I know. I know a lot of stuff about music, and I know a lot of stuff that is still a mystery, that I still want to know. So now being 65, I want to have another 65 years.
Wow,
You know,
wow.
there's still a lot to discover.
Hein, earlier we spoke and you said to me that you played on over 100 albums?
Yeah.
Okay. And can you tell us about that? Not all of them.
No. That would,
Maybe a few, and also the artists that you worked with, those that really inspired you as an individual. Can you tell us about that, please?
yeah. I mean, the recording is one thing. You see, when I started, recording was still quite rare because it was LPs.
Yeah.
And you didn't just go into the studio. It was too expensive, all that, and then you didn't do it for yourself. You needed a record company.
Yeah.
So in the beginning it was not so much, but still, even in the States, I already did a few LPs, and then. But it's like, you're with a band, and the band leader needs something, so he gets a record contract, whatever that means. It often means that they will maybe pay the studio, or the musicians don't get paid.
Yeah.
It was like that. And then later people would know about me and they would call me. A guy in Rome would call me and say, I'm making this quintet record, do you want to come? And I would get on the plane with my bass and do it to get my money and go home. Like a hired gun, let's say. At the same time, since it's jazz, it's not like real studio work like you can do as an electric player. You can have studio work where you just 3-hour session and you do a commercial, it doesn't matter. You read the notes, you play the groove. It was never really like that. And then, the more I had the chance to play with great people like Chet Baker and Toots Thielemans and Dee Dee Bridgewater, and of course these people recorded. And they also often recorded live. So there was a whole thing, like I remember the first recording I made, which was with an American alto player named Mark Lewis. It was a little thing, and we recorded in a little studio somewhere. But I thought, gee, now every note I play is going to be on this LP. It's got to be correct. And I made myself completely uptight because I couldn't loosen up because I was so aware of, it's and that took about maybe 10 years to ease off. And after that I realized, what can I do? I can only play. And if there's a mistake, it means that I make the mistake. Because I'm human, I make a mistake. And if it's on the record, there's a mistake on the record. Who cares? I mean, if it's a mistake in an arrangement or something, you try to fix it. And now, with Pro Tools, all that shit is very easy to fix. But in those days, with Tete Montouliou or something, we would just go to the studio. 2 hours later, we had a record.
So tell me, there were no overdubs back in the day?
No.
You just had to do perfect?
Yeah, I just go and that's it, headphones on, and because to get some separation in the sound, and that's it. And then later when Pro Tools came, you could, but still not much, because you can't put in a whole new bass part, because everybody's in jazz, everybody's responding. When I do ba-doo-ga, dance, bass, that says the drums. Now if I do my part again, then all of a sudden his part doesn't make sense anymore. So, but in the arrangements we would do things, and I produced also like some 100 records. So I really loved being next to the engineer and think about that. Where a band would say, "Oh, the coda, we did it completely wrong. Let's do another take." I say, "Guys, it was a fantastic take, and the coda was wrong. Let's do the coda. Take it from the last 5 bars, 8 bars before the coda. Let's do it now, because we still have the energy in it rolling." But they would play perfect coda, and then we would splice it together. And by doing that, you saved time, which is money in the studio. You saved energy from the musicians, which is very important. And you saved a good take, because the musicians sometimes are too deep into the music, so they strive for perfection. But sometimes imperfection with a great feel is much better music than perfection where the feel is kind of gone. So now I loved, and still I love very much being in the studio, whether on either side of the glass. So
this is very interesting. Can you tell me about the gear that you're using?
Well, it's of course with the electric bass it was fun because I had this electric bass and then I put a DiMarzio pickup on and then I don't know, like I put a battery.
Did you have Fender back in the day? Or?
No, I never got to that point. But my last bass was a little, it was a nice bass. In fact, it was a Les Paul model, black, short scale, fretless.
Okay.
It was a nice little bass. But anyhow, then I got into the double bass. And with the double bass, we just slammed on a pickup, and there was not much choice in the early 70s. So yeah, then you had a polytone. There was also not much choice because you were not going. You know, when I played electric, I bought, because you get that cheap, like a London City. You know, two of these massive things with two amplifier, very heavy. But that wasn't necessary for jazz. And then Polytone came with those boxes, and that was cool. So pick up, Polytone, play. Did it sound good? No, not really. And then later, the pickups, like in the 90s, pickups became better for double bass. So, and then also I started to experiment with a microphone. So now I have on the bass, I have a really good condenser mic and a really bright pickup. And the combination of that works. What I put in my amp on stage is just a pickup, and I have a small amp because I only need to hear it myself because the other guys have it in their monitors. And the sound guy gets both. He's got the DI for the pickup and he's got the mic, and so he can make a little sweet sound so the bass sounds boom and not bing.
Oh, okay. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, but it's a tough instrument because it's a lot of low end, so it has a tendency to
buzz.
And to create feedback, and so I love playing soft on stage. I also never need a monitor because often the bass player is right there in the middle. The piano is here, the drums is there. I can hear the piano. I don't have to hear him loud. Why do I hear? Horn is there. I can hear him soft. Because he's blowing that way, but I can hear him, and all I need to do is hear him. I don't need to. I mean, when the energy.
You feel him, you can hear.
Right. I don't have to listen to a record through my monitor. I think it's over. I mean, for certain music, more complicated pop music, I can see that in ear, and you have a perfect mix with the reverb, and then you really find your part in that. I can see that, but for jazz, you just want to feel the music, and when it comes out of a speaker, you don't. Well, it's second-hand feeling, you know. But I mean, I was always interested in getting that good sound. I love little, lexicon, little reverb, but I never invested in the gear myself, since I was completely dependent on the guy, because
the engineer.
Because I hardly played in clubs anymore. It was always on stage. But of course that was dangerous as well, because if the engineer didn't hear it, if he doesn't have a double bass in his ear, he thinks Fender bass, and he's gonna do and then your bass sounds like, I mean, some of these guys but I have my favorite engineer, and when I did my own band, I would take him. He was just the fourth member of the band, especially when you have a trio where the bass is the main instrument. You need a good engineer that understands it, otherwise the whole music falls flat. You know? But
And do you have any advice for young up-and-coming bass players and musicians out there?
No, well, the advice is indeed play. You can't beat playing. Go to jam sessions, play by ear, fall on your face, pick yourself up, find a groove with a drummer. Never think about trying to be smart. Try to think about making the stuff feel good. Because that's what music, that's the essential element of music. It's actually the time and the sound. And then, if you're a serious person, which is, it's wonderful to be a serious person, then you study the chords, and you play piano, and you study the instrument, and you think about your fingerings and your position, not just do like this, put the bass too low so this thing is happening, because you block all your. I had a good friend when I started, and he said, and this is so true, when it looks good, it probably is. And if you take the next step, when it looks bad, when somebody plays like this, you know he's having a problem. He
Yeah.
will have a problem. His
Yeah.
tendons are all tight already.
Mm.
How can he be loose? You
Mhm.
know. Same here. Like if you play like that, do it like that. It's not for nothing that classical guitar players play, you know, with this little thing, and they play like that. They're not
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
sit like that.
Yeah.
It's terrible. And electric bass is a little bit of an impossible instrument. It's a long neck. Those first frets, you can do that, but it's kind of a stretch.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look it looks tensed, and it is tensed. So the technique to play an F and an F with the fourth finger,
Mhm.
and especially when you play why would you why would you do that? It's terrible.
Yeah.
If you get here, it's different.
Mm.
So you have to think about these things, you know. I mean, I often feel that like I'm an investigator. You know? Part of my job is to investigate the relationship between this body and that body.
Yeah.
And it needs to be harmonious, just like an Olympic runner will think about his shoes and the way he rolls it down and where he puts his, or a bike guy,
Yeah,
you know, they know all the details. We should, we could take it that serious, and it's great. Because in the end, what do you want to do? You want to be free on that thing.
Definitely.
And so you don't want to think about it. And if you didn't teach your hand to do nice fingering, you're going to go tu 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 tu
Mm.
because you hear tu 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 tu,
Mm.
and you go tu 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 tu. Ah, that's too bad because you could have done tu 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 tu, you
There
know,
we
like
go.
that.
Mm.
So yeah, my method. I mean, that's my that's you see, that's the first book. No, that's the second book, and that's the first book. It's like 950 pages. It's a bass method that I wrote.
That you wrote, okay.
And it's actually only about that. It only talks about fingerings, and
Is it available online?
it's online, yeah.
Okay, so people should go on your Facebook page and get it there.
Yeah, Facebook I don't, but there is, it's called comprehensivebassmethod.com.
Okay.
And there you see, I also did a book with etudes, that's more kind of jazz in the jazz language. But it's for double bass. I mean, as an electric player, maybe 40% is usable, and
Yeah,
the rest
yeah.
is because it talks about thumb position in transitions, and but it's all terrible sounding. It sounds like terrible, because when you say, okay, I'm going to investigate, doo-dee doo-dee, let's say this, doo-dee 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 doo-dee. Now, that's very interesting for the hand to do, and you shift up and you spread again, shift up, spread again. What that sounds like, I don't even care, but
Yeah.
it sounds like something very strange.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, baby, you, be you.
Yeah.
Who wants to hear that? But for your hands, it's a great
Yeah, yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Or, boo-dee, boo-dee, boo.
Mhm.
You go the other way and you
Mhm.
explore all that. And
All the
by that-
positionings, like
yeah, and the way you move, and you can go to do do do, or you can go to do do do, or you can go to do to, you can go to do 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 do. You know, like
Mhm.
all the manipulation of your fingers.
Mhm.
I love that stuff. I love that, and that'll fill the day. You know, before you know it. Because I had another time when I was about 40, I really wanted to practice again. And then there was a guy that came to my house, another bass player, that was very helpful. Every morning, he was there. His name was Bas,
Mhm.
bass. And we would practice together, slow, just do 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 do
Wow.
do do, F major 9, do 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 do, B flat, and we both could, we could, but we didn't.
Mhm.
We just said, nice, solid, beautiful, regular sound.
With the
Nice
metronome?
With the metronome,
Okay.
everything with the metronome. Metronome always slow, metronome never faster than 100. I used to have one of these old ones,
Okay.
and it was all shiny on the top
Mhm.
and all rusted beneath
Okay.
it, because I would never, if it was faster than 100, I'd go to half,
Mhm.
because 100 is the same as 50, so I would never do tick, 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 then I would be tick, tick, tack, tack, tack. My metronome would be there, although I'd be playing do 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 do, but not do 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 do. So yeah, things like that. I mean, I could go on, man.
Yeah, that's interesting. Alright, thank you so much for your time, for making time for me.
What a pleasure, man.
Making time for From the Cape of Bass. Godspeed on your journey, man. Thank you.
Thank you, and all the best to you and all the bass players out there.
Thank you. Thank you so much for liking and sharing this video with your fellow bass community. Please follow From the Cape with Bass on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Thank you so much.